Herein is recounted from the Chronicles of Arda the long and sorrowful tale of two peoples, those of the stone and those of the star. It is a history, you see, of their friendship, their feud, and the very long road that led them, at last, to an unforeseen healing. It is recorded that in the winter of the year 3019 of the Third Age, deep within the timeless borders of Lothlorien, a dwarf knelt before an elf queen. This was Gimli, son of Glóin, and he had entered that wood blindfolded, his heart filled with the ancient mistrust of his people for the Lady of the Galadrim. In their tales, she was named the Sorceress of the Golden Wood. And yet, in her presence, all that mistrust was just swept away. He asked not for gold or for steel, but for a single strand of her hair.
And this presents a true wonder, doesn't it? How could this one quiet moment mend a wound so deep, a grievance that had been nursed across ages of the world? What ancient fracture was so profound, and what grace could possibly be powerful enough to set it right? Well, to find the answer, the lore must be searched. The pages of history must be turned back to a time before the sun and the moon.
The very roots of this tale lie in the elder days, back in the years of the trees, when the fates of these two kindreds were first entwined. This was a time when great wonders were wrought by their joined hands, before pride sundered what skill had once united.
First, of course, were the Eldar, the elves. They were the firstborn of Ilúvatar, who awoke under the stars before the world was even fully shaped. Their spirits were bound to Arda until its very end, and theirs was the love of all growing things, of light and of lore.
But the Khazad, the dwarves, well, they were of a different making. You see, Aule the smith was impatient for the coming of the children, so he fashioned them in secret, deep under the mountains. And though Ilúvatar granted them true life and adopted them as his own, they were always a people apart. From this separate making was bred in them a pride as hard as the stone they loved, and a deep, deep guardedness against the firstborn.
And yet, in the early days of Beleriand, a great friendship did arise between them. The elves saw the unmatched skill of the Naugrim, the masters of stone, and the dwarves, well, they saw in the artistry of the elves a beauty they could help bring into being. In this time, their skills were entwined in works the like of which has never been seen again in Middle-earth.
The greatest of all these collaborations was Menegroth, the 1,000 caves of King Thingol. At his command, the dwarves of Belagos delved a palace from the living rock, a mansion of stone made in the likeness of a forest, its pillars shaped like the great trees of the Vala Orome. It was the high promise of their friendship made manifest for all to see.
But this friendship, it was fated to be poisoned and then shattered. The catalyst was a treasure of terrible beauty and great doom, the Nauglamir, the famed necklace of the dwarves. And into this necklace, King Thingol desired to set the holiest of all gems, a Silmaril recovered from the iron crown of Morgoth himself.
The ancient scrolls tell of what happened next, a swift and terrible doom. When the work was complete, a fire of greed was kindled in the hearts of the dwarvish smiths. They laid claim to the necklace and slew King Thingol right where he stood. In their rage, they sacked the very halls their own kin had helped to build. But vengeance followed, and the host of Nagrod was ambushed and destroyed. And so the first and deepest wound was struck between elf and dwarf.
From the blood that was shed in Menegroth grew a bitter, bitter enmity, a shadow that would lie between the two kindreds for uncounted years. The memory of this fall was passed from father to son, a poison that soured all future dealings and set them on a long, long road of estrangement.
And through the long ages, this grievance only deepened. In the Second Age, as the elven realm of Eregion burned at the hands of Sauron, the great gates of Khazad-dûm were shut, and no aid came. Then, in the Third Age, King Thranduil of Mirkwood, a Sindarin elf who had certainly not forgotten that ancient wrong, imprisoned Thorin Oakenshield and his company. Each age just laid another stone upon the cairn of their mistrust.
Both peoples nursed their grievances in the deep memory of their race. The elves recounted the tale of a murdered king and a home defiled. The dwarves, for their part, spoke of their rightful craft being denied, of debts unpaid, and of an army slain by treachery. Unbending pride met unbending pride. There could be no mending.
And so it remained, all the way until the waning of the Third Age, when, by a strange turn of fate, the heirs of this ancient feud were bound together in a single company.
They were tasked with a quest upon which the fortunes of the entire world depended. Into the Fellowship of the Ring came Legolas Greenleaf, son of the very king who had held the dwarves captive, and with him Gimli, son of Glóin, who had been one of those captives. They were the feud made flesh, their hearts steeped in the long suspicion of their kindreds.
And yet, in the Ninth of Lorien, something unforeseen happened. Gimli, who was expecting the sorceress of his people's darkest tales, was instead humbled by the light and grace of Galadriel. When she asked what gift he would desire of the elves, his reply was not that of a grudging foe, but of one whose heart was completely conquered.
Indeed, when the lady pressed him, he asked not for a gem or a blade, as his fathers might have done. He asked only for a single strand of her golden hair, to be an heirloom of his house and a pledge of new peace between the mountain and the wood. This was not a request born of greed, but of pure reverence, a desire not to possess but to honor.
And this brings us to the very heart of the chronicle, because the true weight of Galadriel's response can only be understood by recalling a moment long, long past, in the blessed realm of Valinor during the years of the trees themselves.
You see, the lore masters tell us that Fëanor himself, the mightiest of all the Noldor, was enchanted by the light within Galadriel's hair. He had 3 times demanded a tress from her, and yet 3 times she refused him, because she saw in his heart a fire of pride and greed. But to Gimli the dwarf, who asked in humility, she gave not 1 strand, but 3.
In that single moment, an ancient history was unwritten. Galadriel's gift was an act of grace that looked beyond the grievances of ages and saw the worth of a single, humble heart. It completely transformed Gimli, planting in him a love for the elven kind that began, at last, to mend that 7,000-year rift, starting with his companion Legolas.
Upon his departure from that golden wood, Gimli's own words bear witness to this profound change. He counted the parting as his worst wound, a testament to the beauty he now saw with new eyes, a beauty he would treasure for all of his days.
And from that day forward, the bond between Gimli and Legolas grew into a friendship that became a song and a legend. After the War of the Ring was over, they journeyed together, each showing the other the wonders of his own world, the glittering caves of Aglarond and the green woods of Ithiolan.
And this tale has a final, truly astonishing postscript. Of all the stubborn and earthbound children of Ule, it is recorded that only one ever passed over the sea to the undying lands of Valinor. This was a grace granted to no other of his kind.
That dwarf, of course, was Gimli. He sailed at last into the west with his friend Legolas when his years grew heavy. And the sages say this grace was granted to him for the great love he bore the Lady of the Galadriel. And so the story comes full circle, ending just as it began, in an act of grace, freely given, that healed an ancient hurt. And so we see it, how a single moment of humility healed what ages and ages of pride had broken. It leaves us to ponder, as we close this chronicle, where else in the great tales of sorrow and war might one such act of unlooked-for grace have turned the very tide of doom?